Good morning. Hope everybody's having a good day. And I apologize for any noise or whatever that may come across here today. It's kind of been a rough morning. So today we're going to take Lear Part 4. Let's remember that we're doing Lear today in class. Lear student presentation is on March 26th. We're also doing a quiz. And then we start the comedy. And the Lear paper is due at 11:59 p.m. on March 31st. On the quiz, I'm grouping the characters here by family, for lack of a better phrase. The three sisters, Cordelia, Goneril, and Regan, Edgar, Edmund, and Gloucester, and then Lear, Kent, and the Fool. And I think that those 9 make perfect sense as the main characters in the play. I'm leaving off Albany. I'm leaving off Cornwall. I think I can get the questions I need about them worked in some other way. Just a quick sample question here. You'll notice that the quotes are sort of paraphrased. I'll try to keep doing that paraphrasing sorts of things. And the idea of the plot details, who does what to whom, those sorts of things will also be part of the quiz. It'll be a standard 20-question quiz, just like everything, all the other ones have been. And we'll kind of go from there. We've talked a lot about the idea of eyesight and blindness, but I do think this play also deals with the other senses. I know that I spoke at least once about the idea that Shakespeare never forgets that his characters have bodies. And if the characters have bodies, then I think there's a whole idea of the characters being able to use the other senses in some way or another to their benefit or to their ill, or to be tricked by the other senses. And so, the Fool sets up this idea: all that follow their noses are led by their eyes, but blind men. In other words, the eyesight is still the key, and the blind men are the one that follow their nose. But there's not a nose among 20 that but can smell him that's stinking. The idea that there's, senses may fail. And I think the idea of the senses failing, the idea of humanity's frailty, all of those sorts of things are part of this play. And so let's kind of keep going here. Sorry for all the stammering. Regan, after the Duke has been blinded, tells him to smell his way to Dover. And the idea of going to Dover, the idea of committing suicide at Dover, but let him smell his way there. He doesn't have his eyes. He can't see. Let him smell his way. Use the other senses. It plays, I think, often what the Fool was talking about earlier. And then we have this idea of the senses, but Edgar is lying, and Edgar is using Gloucester's lack of senses to keep Gloucester alive. All right. Gloucester's sense of balance, which probably isn't one of the taste, touch, smell sorts of senses, but still a sense of balance is working fine. Edgar lies to him. Do you hear the sea? Gloucester says no. Gloucester's senses are working fine. Edgar lies to him. They are grown imperfect because your eyes have grown imperfect. And then Gloucester, once again, his senses are working perfectly. Methinks thy voice is altered, and thou speakest in better phrase and matter than thou didst. And Edgar, thou art much deceived, which is a very, very true, ironic statement. He is being much deceived. And nothing am I changed but in my garments. That too is a true statement. But again, we as the audience know things that Gloucester doesn't. The irony here with the senses, I think, is an important element of all of this. And then Lear, and I should have bolded this, I apologize. Lear does the "let me wipe it first, it smells of mortality." The idea that the senses are linked to mortality, and certainly the idea that with the senses, we can smell a decaying corpse, things like that. That's a big chunk of all of this. And so the senses, all of the senses play a role in this play, and they play it physically, and they play it to some degree metaphorically. Even the sense of taste. All friends shall taste the wages of their virtue, and all foes the cup of their deservings. I think it's important to understand that all the theory we have done, all of the other stuff we've done, one of the lines that I think is most important here is that Shakespeare writes about the body, Shakespeare writes about the emotion, Shakespeare writes about the mind, Shakespeare writes about the soul, but he also writes about the body. And this play deals with all of that: mind, soul, body. And then we have some more lies about the senses. Edgar sets up Gloucester, sets up the idea of how fearful and dizzy 'tis to cast one's eyes so low. The crows that wing the midway air show scarce so gross as beetles. In other words, we are so high up on the cliff that the crows below us are nothing bigger than beetles if you're an ordinary average human being. And then, looking down, the fishermen that walk on the beach appear like mice. And that's too small for sight. The murmuring surge cannot be heard. He's using sight. He's using hearing. He's talking about, I'll look no more lest my brain turn, and the division sight topple me headlong. The sense of balance that Gloucester had perfectly before, that sense of balance, he is trying to play on that as well, even if it's not one of the five senses. And so the lying about the senses allows the bigger lie. You're within a foot of the extreme edge. For all beneath the moon, I would not leap upright. In other words, fall forward. And we still have the body. The idea of, thou hast heavy substance, but bleedest not, speakest, and are sound. If you had been but gossamer, if you had been but feathers, so many fathom down precipitating, thou shiverest like an egg. And again, the idea of breathing, smelling, pulling in. And Gloucester, have I fallen or no? And Edgar says, from the dread summit, look, I have no eyes. One of the statements, again, that I think was true both physically and metaphorically throughout the play. And as we're going through this scene, the idea of the physical senses, the idea of the mind, the idea of the soul, all I think come into play here. And we're using the senses to get there. The other thing I want to talk about here at the end is two things. Number one, we've mentioned several times that Shakespeare plagiarizes himself. Here, Lear has gone, why should a dog, a horse, a rat have life, and thou no breath at all? And, in Romeo and Juliet, heaven is here where Juliet lives, and every cat and dog and every little mouse, every unworthy thing live here in heaven and may look at her. Dogs, horse, rat, cat, dog, mouse, using these things to say that they are privileged as opposed to either the character Romeo or the character Cordelia who has died. And then notice that Lear passes almost immediately right afterwards. And then finally, when we have this line, I want to take a look at, and my poor fool is hanged. It's lowercase. We're not talking about the fool. He's talking about Cordelia. But I think there's a question. What happened to the fool? Where is the fool? Where did we last see the fool? What happened to all the wisdom from foolishness that comes from the fool? And as we're going through this thing, I think there's this big question about where did the fool go? What happened to him? And so for your daily writing, that's what I'd like you to answer. What happens to the fool? Hope everybody has a good day. I hope everybody is ready for the quiz on Friday. And if you have questions about the paper, you'll be able to ask them in class.